want to get onto my second panel now. Joining me on the desk is Gemma Tognini from GT Communications, and from Perth we're joined by Caroline De Russo, host of the Royal Report here on Sky News at 10 o'clock. Thanks both for joining us.
Thanks,
as
Chris.
per usual, such solemn, horrible circumstances this time. And when I was thinking about all this unfolding yesterday and talking to some Jewish friends, I thought of you two, because you were both there doing a tour, a study tour effectively of Israel and the territories in June, so recently.
That's right.
So, Caroline, tell us what it's like to see the atrocities unfold when you're fresh back from a country where you've lived and breathed that liberal, multicultural democracy that it is.
Well, it knocks the wind right out of you, Chris. And to be honest, I still don't think I've really quite recovered from the shock. Both Gemma and I were down in Sderot, where we've seen just the most dehumanising and brutal atrocities. I knew it the minute I saw it when there were those bodies slain on the ground at the bus stops. Now, the bus stops in Sderot are all makeshift bomb shelters. You can't mistake them. And then we were also taken to where the strip is, and we stood inside the first fence. And then you can see, obviously, the razor wire and the second fence. So being so close to the Gaza Strip, and you just know there's a pressure cooker on the other side. But it was just horrific to watch it happen, and in places where you've been to and you've seen, and like you said, we were only there 4 months ago. I just can't get over it.
Yeah, Caroline, it is just terrible. And I think, Gemma, the other point, when you've seen those installations, you've seen the watchtowers, the heavy military presence.
Yep.
It's inconceivable that so many terrorists got across the border into Israel, but on top of that, just the barbarity against their fellow humans.
I've found, like most decent humans, the last 48 hours incredibly distressing, not just because from a perspective of humanity, but having, as Caroline just mentioned, been to Sderot, and the briefing that we had that day for those of you who haven't had the privilege of going to Israel, because it's an incredible country, the briefing was, if the sirens go off, you have 15 seconds. And they weren't messing around. So every bus shelter is a bomb shelter. Every home has a bomb shelter in it that is funded by the Israeli government. Children's playgrounds have got bomb shelters dressed up as caterpillars and butterflies and things like that. But the remarkable thing about Sderot is that you can't get a rental there. The vacancies are non-existent. There is a thriving local economy, good schools, all of that kind of thing. People flock to live there because they have an inherent belief in good. And I feel like what we have seen in the last 24 hours, like you and I were discussing just before we came on air, and I know you're going to get to it in a minute, but imagine being a Jewish person in Australia tonight, a Jewish person in Sydney particularly, being told, you can't go out tonight. You can't go out because you're not safe, and you can't go and honour your dead at the Opera House because there are people celebrating the barbaric acts of savagery that have been perpetuated and are still going on. I find that it breaks my brain in several ways. Yeah,
it breaks my brain and my heart. It seems almost inconceivable in this country. In fact, there's an update from there, what's happening at the Opera House tonight, where it has been lit up in the colours to reflect Israel, in blue and white to reflect their flag. There have been flares let off there by the pro-Palestinian protesters. And as we've mentioned a number of times, police warning Jewish Australians, the Jewish community, to stay away for their own safety. And just have a listen to what these people in Australia are chanting about Israel and about Australia.
Shame, shame, Israel!
Shame, shame, Israel!
Shame, shame, Australia!
Shame, shame, Australia!
Shame, shame, Albert!
Shame, shame, Albert!
Terrifying.
It is terrifying. Do we have to defend the right of people celebrating that atrocity and condemning Australia and Israel, yet they get all the rights of Australians? I struggle with that today.
Where is... I imagine being the Prime Minister would be a pretty tough gig. I imagine being the Foreign Minister would be a pretty tough gig, but where is the leadership where that's concerned? I would bet my backside points to the ground, Christopher, and I reckon 90% of Australians would be repulsed by that behaviour. We are famed around the world for our inclusivity, for the fact that we are a country that has made multiculturalism what it is. That is not that.
Yeah, I don't think there's been strong enough condemnation of what was said in the protests last night, Caroline. We've got to hear something stronger and some stronger action about whoever's organised this tonight.
It's absolutely revolting. Like, watching that just makes me seethe. And what Gemma said is absolutely correct. We have a beautiful multicultural community here. I'm part of it. My family's part of it. My family migrated here from post-war Europe. You know what? Leave your disgusting, backward, sick, ideological, regional prejudices behind you, because they are not welcome in this country.
Indeed. Look, we've only got a minute to go, and I just don't feel like going on to any other topic. No. What do we see, Gemma, from the... I'm sure they condemn this, but certainly the leaders of these protests and the people who are making these inflammatory comments, possibly, not condemning everyone, this is something for police and others to look at, there's a possibility that they're breaching our anti-terror laws.
100%. I mean, way to put yourself on a watch list.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that I thought when I saw that. I sincerely hope our intelligence services are doing their job at something so demonstrably anti-Australian.
Yeah, it's against the national interest, obviously, to have this sort of division in the country. Just before we go, let me show you some pictures that have just come in from the Opera House, and this is the flares going up at the Opera House. Here is Australia trying to honour and mourn innocent Israelis killed in an acts of terrorism. And the Palestinian supporters there, they've squeezed out any Jewish Australians who wanted to be there to commemorate it. They're lighting flares and chanting against Australia and against Israel. Just shocking stuff. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts on it, Gemma and Caroline. We'll catch you next week.